Howdy folks, once again it's Donnie here, and today I want to talk a bit about the Signal private messaging app. And unless you've been living under a rock for about the past week or so, you probably have seen that the Messenger has been in the news lately, and not for a good reason. It turns out that some high-ranking officials in the United States government, including Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, got into a bit of hot water, so to speak, because they decided to go into a Signal messaging group chat and discuss whether or not they should launch a military attack against the Houthis in Yemen. Okay? And what got them into trouble was that somehow, some way, they accidentally invited a journalist for New Yorker magazine, a guy named Jeffrey Goldberg, into their group chat, and then Mr. Goldberg revealed to the world about how they got him into their group chat and revealed to him a bunch of classified information that he should not have known about. You can't make this stuff up, okay? You just can't. And now, commentators, a lot of commentators who I respect, they've been talking about how, they really screwed up because they should not have been using a non-secure app. Well, actually, Signal supposedly is secure, right? Which is why they were using it probably, supposedly private. So the problem there was not so much that it wasn't a secure app, is the problem was that they screwed up and accidentally brought this journalist into the group chat where he had no business being, okay? Whether or not Signal is an improved app for these people to be using, I don't know, but whatever, it doesn't matter, okay? But in the days since, Mr. Hegseth and Mr. Waltz have been trying to do damage control, going on the news media and everything, and do damage control. President Trump has tried to do some damage control in an interview clip I saw with him a couple of days ago. He's talking about how he thought maybe Signal might be broken. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And it's part of the problem. It's closed source. But let's get to that in just a few moments. For now, I want to talk about first, what is Signal? Okay, well, Signal is supposedly a private messenger app, and what makes it private is end-to-end encryption. In other words, the message is encrypted on the sender's device, whether it be an iPhone, an Android phone, or a computer, okay? That message is encrypted before it leaves that sender's device, and is not decrypted until it reaches the recipient's device. So theoretically, at least, that means that nobody in between can decrypt that message and see what you're trying to talk about with that other person. Okay? Now, other applications like the regular SMS on your phone, that's not end-to-end encrypted. Okay? You might have the TLS transport level encryption that'll send your message via an encrypted channel, but the message is not encrypted on your device. It leaves your device as plain text, and then once it gets to the servers for your ISP or your wireless provider, whoever it is, or email provider, if you're talking about email, then it's decrypted back into plain text there. And of course, Google, we know about Google. They they got in a bit of trouble a few years ago when it was found out that they were actually scanning people's emails on the Gmail platform, looking for keywords so that they could tailor the advertising messages to those users, right? Creepy? Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit creepy, okay? And but anyway, Signal is one of several different messenger apps that are supposed to be using end-to-end encryption. Supposedly nobody in between, whether it be the provider, your ISP, whoever else, supposedly nobody in between you and the recipient can decode or decrypt your messages to find out what you're talking about, right? So anyway, Signal, I don't know if it's really broken as President Trump claims. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there are some red flags, all right? For one thing, Signal is run on a centralized server. They will not allow anyone else to set up a Signal server. All messages have to go through that one Signal server, all right? Supposedly the Signal clients on people's devices, those clients are supposedly open source code. They can be audited, but on the server and the source code is partially closed source, partially proprietary closed source that nobody can audit. One of the basic principles of cryptography is you want to use open source code. You want to use products that are open source code because that way they can be audited. You can ensure that there are no back doors for anybody to get into and grab your messages and decode them, right? So, could it be that Signal is broken? We don't know. Could be perfectly fine, but we don't know. And in the case of our Secretary of Defense and our National Security Advisor, in this case, I think it was more just a case of carelessness, where they accidentally brought this journalist into the group chat. And so, I don't know. But that doesn't matter. Let's talk about stuff that we do know and have more practical or things that are more relevant to us normal users. Okay? And I'm going to talk about the case here of an independent journalist here in the U.S. named Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is a very famous, very high-profile user of Signal. Now, back in 2021, I believe it was, he tried to set up an interview with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. And I believe that was when he was still working for Fox News, if I remember correctly. But anyway, he tried to set this up, and he set it up via Signal. And so he and whoever was on the Russian side, they were both using Signal in order to set up this meeting. But then he goes to Washington, D.C., he sees some friends there, and then he sees somebody from the government says, hey, we know that you're setting up this meeting with Vladimir Putin. And Tucker's like, how did you know? I didn't tell anybody about that, including my wife. So, how did you know? The only people I communicated with about this were the people on the other end of the Signal conversation, which is supposed to be all private, supposed to be end-to-end encrypted, right? So he got scared and he canceled that meeting. But then, after the special military operation that Russia launched against Ukraine, Tucker decides to go again. He decides again that he wants to go and try to interview President Putin. And so again, he uses signal to set up the meeting. And again, somebody in the government says, hey, we know that you're setting up this meeting with Vladimir Putin. And again, Tucker says, how did you know that? Because again, he didn't tell anybody, you know. The only people he told about it were the people on the other end of that signal conversation. And apparently they didn't tell anybody either, right? So then, once he gets to Russia and in Moscow, he decides to set up a meeting with Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden, of course, was the American whistleblower who used to work for a CIA contractor. And he revealed, by releasing a bunch of classified documents that he had collected, that the United States government, specifically the CIA and the NSA, the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency, were both conducting mass surveillance against all citizens of the United States. You know, and by that I mean, yeah, collecting all phone calls that made, all emails sent, all text messages. And so in order to avoid prosecution, because, yeah, there's supposedly whistleblower protections in the United States, but they don't work, okay? He saw the example of other CIA people who tried to blow the whistle. Instead of getting rewarded for revealing the crimes of the United States, they got punished, and in some cases went to prison, right? He wanted to avoid that fate. He wanted to do his duty to reveal the crimes of the United States government, but he also wanted to avoid prosecution, so he fled, right? And he ended up getting stuck in Russia because on the way, he had to stop there on the way to Ecuador, which was his real destination. While he was there in the airport, in the Moscow airport, waiting for his connecting flight, the United States government canceled his passport, so he wasn't able to leave. So he basically got stuck in Russia. Okay, he didn't mean to go to Russia, get stuck there, but that's where he got stuck. Okay, but anyway, Tucker Carlson used Signal to communicate with Ed Snowden to set up a meeting with him. Again, somebody in the U.S. government revealed to Tucker, yeah, we know that you're meeting with Ed Snowden. And Ed Snowden did not want it known that he was meeting with Tucker Carlson. Tucker wanted to do an interview with him, and Ed Snowden said, no, I would rather not have people know that I met with you, okay? So they said, fine, we can meet, have dinner or something. And yeah, Ed Snowden says, yeah, fine, we'll do that. But the only way they communicated to set up this meeting was via Signal. And yet the government knew. Somehow they got that communication, and they knew that he was setting up this meeting with Ed Snowden. So Tucker, when he gets back, he talks to one of his friends. And look, I don't know Tucker personally. I've never talked to him. But I get the impression that he's like the majority of people who use tech. He understands enough about it to be able to like turn on a computer or turn on his phone and install applications and to use them, but he doesn't really know what makes the technology work. He doesn't know enough to go in and really study the technology to figure out what really went wrong with the Signal app, for example, okay? And, but anyway, he gets back to the States, and he talks to one of his friends, and the friend says, hey, it doesn't matter what type of messaging technology that you use. Doesn't matter if you use a private message. Anything you use, our CIA, our NSA can break into them. They can break your messages and see everything that you're doing, right? And Tucker then apparently just accepts that and accepts the fact that, hey, there's nothing you can do, to protect your privacy against the U.S. government. Is that really the case? I don't know. Maybe it is, but I don't know, because there are other aspects of this. Okay, one aspect, as I said, there are certain red flags with Signal. Okay, like the fact that they're using a centralized server. All messages have to go through that server. Part of the server code is closed source, so it cannot be audited. But on the other hand, they do have an incentive to get people to use their app. If they have a back door in their software and they make it that blatant by telling a journalist, yeah, we know everything you're doing, who's going to use their app? Okay, the whole business is going to collapse if it's that blatant that they have a back door, and they really do have a back door. Okay, so I would think they would try to keep it on the down low a little bit, make it a little bit more subtle, maybe try to, I don't know, just make it a lot less obvious, right? But the fact that these government officials are just going and telling them, yeah, we got your messages, it tells me maybe it's not that Signal is the problem. Maybe it's another problem. Could be the device. Now, something else I've been seeing here in recent days is that, yeah, the CIA and the NSA do have ways of planting malware on a person's device, which records every single thing that a user is doing and sends that information back to the security agencies. Creepy? Yeah. Okay, and what makes it even worse is that a person doesn't even have to click on anything. Just visit a website. Visit a website, and the malware automatically gets downloaded to your device, right? And then on top of that, you have the operating systems themselves nowadays. Like a few years ago, Apple was experimenting with technology, and I think they had to abandon it because there was kind of an uproar about it, so they had to abandon it. But they were experimenting with technology that would scan photos on people's iPhones, and it might have been on macOS computers as well. I don't know, but at least it was on the iPhones. They were using this technology to scan the pictures to look for illicit pictures of children. All right, now I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of people taking those kinds of pictures. Don't get me wrong about that. But there's also the possibility that maybe these scanners could be mistaken and get completely innocent people into trouble. I don't know. But it's an invasion of privacy either way. Especially when the scanning technology was sending this information back to Apple. Okay, Apple, I assume, would send any suspicious information about the users and their photos on to federal law enforcement agencies. Or that's my assumption. Okay, so yeah, even though I'm not in favor of people taking those kinds of pictures, still, that is an invasion of privacy, and if the U.S. government is involved, that is a violation of the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is supposed to guarantee against unreasonable searches and seizures. Okay? And of course, the mass surveillance, that Ed Snowden revealed to us, hey, also a violation of the Fourth Amendment. All right? So, yeah, creepy stuff, right? And then we've got the operating systems themselves, okay? Not just specific apps, but the operating systems. Okay, so Windows 10 and Windows 11 now have included AI features called Copilot, and there's one called Recall. Now, Microsoft got in trouble about the Recall because it was found out that this Recall feature was taking periodic snapshots of a person's desktop, uploading that to Microsoft's AI servers. Whether they're still doing it or not, I don't know. But at least for a while they were. And also the supposedly macOS on the newer Apple Silicon Macs, which are including AI technology, which does kind of the same thing, right? And not only that, but if you on Windows 10 and Windows 11, when you install Windows 10 or Windows 11, you need to create an account at Outlook.com. You create an email account with Outlook.com. You use that account to log into Windows 10 and Windows 11, right? You put photos into the pictures directory of your drive, and you know what's going to happen? Periodically, you will receive an email to your Outlook.com account saying, oh, here are your memories from this day. And it will have pictures that you put into your pictures folder on that day. Creepy, right? And that's how they do, okay? So yeah, in Tucker Carlson's case, it could be that maybe Signal is perfectly fine. Maybe Signal wasn't a problem. So it could be, as I said, could be either maybe the government planted some malware on his phone, or the phone itself, the operating system itself, was sending this information back to Apple, who in turn was sending it back to the federal government. We don't know, and unfortunately, we probably never will know. And unfortunately, Tucker Carlson, as I see it, apparently is not tech savvy enough to investigate this stuff and to try to figure out what happened. All right? So instead, he's just blindly accepting his friend's assessment that you cannot have any type of private conversations on a phone, no matter what you do, no matter what app you use, because the government knows how to break into them. Okay? But I'm not so sure. There are some privacy experts out there who can give you some ways to maybe make your communications more secure. One is a guy named Rob Braxman, who has a channel here on YouTube and also on Rumble. And he explains a lot about how you can try to ensure that your communications are secure. And he's not the only one. I mean, you look around on YouTube and or do a web search, you're going to find a lot of different solutions that are supposedly more secure and supposedly more private than either Apple's iOS, macOS, or Windows, or Android, okay? One of the things you can do, you can get phones that come with a de-Googled version of Android. The Android operating system itself, yeah, it was produced by Google, but it's all open source. It has to be all open source because it's based on the Linux kernel. It is not legal to use the Linux kernel in proprietary closed source software. Okay, so the Android operating system itself has to be completely free, open source, and but the components but a lot of the components on Android phones are proprietary to Google. Okay, so the operating system itself is open source, but you've got a lot of different applications which are on Android phones, which are not open source, they're proprietary to Google. So we don't know what they're doing, okay? We can't audit them. We can't audit the source code on those. And of course, iOS on iPhones and macOS on the Mac computers, yeah, that's all proprietary closed source too. We can't audit any of that. And Windows, of course, closed source. We can't audit that. All right, we don't know. We don't know if there are backdoors in any of this stuff. Okay, but there are, for phones, there are some solutions. As I said, you could get Android phones that have been de-Googled. All that proprietary Google stuff is taken out, and you can still install apps, apps like Signal or whatever other private messenger you choose, except you just won't be doing it through the Google Store. You'll have to do it by another means, okay? But it can be done, right? And then you've also got other operating systems which are not Android, and not either Android or iOS, but you can take phones like, or operating system like Graphene OS, for example, install it on an Android phone, just replace Android, okay? I'm not a phone expert. I don't know how you do it, but I'm sure you can find plenty of tutorials on YouTube or wherever else on how to do it, right? And also there are tech companies out there, several of them. Rob Braxman, who I mentioned a moment ago, he's one of them. He offers phones which are privacy focused, and which could, I assume, theoretically will protect you against government surveillance. So if Tucker Carlson had been using one of those phones instead of his Apple iPhone, I think he was using an Apple iPhone, but if he'd been using one of those other phones instead of an iPhone, I don't know, maybe he could have kept his communications private, regardless of what technologies or what capabilities the CIA and NSA have. Okay? So, and of course, when you use one of these phones, you also need to make sure that the person on the other end is using a privacy-centric phone, because hey, let's say that you have a good privacy phone, and the person on the other end that you're communicating with has just a regular Android phone or iPhone, and that phone has been compromised, then yeah, your communications are compromised too, because everything's showing up on that other person's end, right? So yeah, it's crazy, but that's how it is, right? And then for computers, what you can do, if you can possibly do it. Now I understand some people have reason that they have to have either macOS or Windows, okay? Some people have applications that have to run on either macOS or Windows. I get that, okay? I get that. But if you are just a normal user who doesn't have any specialized needs like this, my recommendation, ditch macOS, ditch Windows, replace them with Linux, okay? Linux on the desktop, completely different animal than what it was back in 2006 when I first got into Linux, okay? Back then, Linux on the desktop was barely usable. Now it's completely different. You can do just about anything on Linux now that you can with Windows or macOS, okay? And setup is extremely easy now, easy to use. In fact, it's much less of a pain to use than what Windows is, because hey, with Linux, you don't have to worry about, just working along, all of a sudden the hard drive starts thrashing because, hey, it's got to defrag itself. What kind of a mind at Microsoft came up with a file system that has to be defragged all the time? Okay? And then you don't have any control over it, okay, about when it happens. And same way with updates, okay? You can be working along on your Windows machine, all of a sudden start thrashing hard drive again. Well, it's updating itself, okay? No control over when and how it updates itself. Okay? Linux, you have complete control, and you don't have to worry about constantly defragging your hard drives, okay? Because Linux file systems are a lot more resistant to fragmentation, okay? So, yeah, definitely go with Linux if you possibly can, because it's going to be a lot more private, okay? And, well, it's not just Linux. I mean, there's some FreeBSD-based desktop operating systems as well, like Ghost BSD, I think Midnight BSD. Maybe you give them a try, okay? Only thing is not quite as polished or well done. There's a few rough edges around the BSD desktop distros yet, like wireless support, for example. A few things like that. But might not hurt to give them a try if you prefer one of them, if you prefer a BSD-based distro. But Linux, though, I heartily recommend Linux. A lot of different distributions out there you can try, and just you're not stuck with a one-size-fits-all type of operating system where you are with macOS or Windows. If you don't like one Linux distro, try another, right? So, that's, I think that's about it, okay? But other than to say, I would be remiss if I did not include a word from my sponsor, which is me and my books. And for those of you who are already into Linux, if you're into Linux security administration or Linux server administration, you might want to check out my book, Mastering Linux Security and Hardening. Okay, gives you a good rundown on setting up your Linux servers in the most secure manner possible. Okay, and also there is my newest book, The Ultimate Linux Shell Scripting Guide. And hey, it's a bestseller. It's a bestseller, right? With the word ultimate in the title, you know it's got to be good. So it doesn't matter whether you're a complete beginner with the Linux shell or if you're an advanced user. You can use this book because it starts off with the basics and goes through all the complex programming constructs and everything that can help you create really, really useful Linux shell scripts, okay? And we're talking about Bash, Z shell. I even include a little bit of PowerShell in there, okay? For anybody who might be coming over from the Windows Server world, okay? Because there are a few people who do that and they like dealing with PowerShell, okay? But anyway, yeah, that's all I got for right now. So over and out, and I'll catch you next time.